Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Force webinar. My name is Mehreen Mirza, and I'm going to facilitate this webinar and answer questions that you may have during the Q&A break. We are waiting for others to join, but while we are waiting for everyone else to join, let us show you how we can use this webinar to ask questions and access the handouts. As you can see, there is a panel on the right-hand side of your screen with an arrow. Please use the arrow that is represented in an orange box to collapse or open the panel. You can use the question area to type in your questions and click on send or enter. We will receive your questions and answer them by either typing them in or verbally during the Q&A break. If we miss answering any of your questions, we will send you a response via email after the webinar. Also, you can find a copy of today's presentation that is available in the handout section. Please click on the PDF copy by clicking on the title of the handouts as shown here. This handout contains links to individual help guides, knowledge-based articles for each of the topics that we are going to cover today. All of you have been put on mute in order to avoid any confusion during this presentation. Okay, let's just quickly have a look at. Okay, there we go. Now we see that most of you have joined. Let us get started with a brief of today's webinar. The topic for today is 11.1 Site Administration, Part 3 of the 3-part series under Administration, Profile-Based Site Settings. We have with us Christine Smith, who will be our trainer for today and who will go over all the relevant areas under this topic. The duration of this webinar is 1 hour. I will pass over the mic to Christine now. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you so much, Maureen, for that nice introduction, of course. So to get started with today's webinar, we are going to be doing part 3 of our administration series. So the other 2 parts were handled over the last couple of months. So if you didn't get a chance to watch those, they will be on Zendesk, where you'll be able to view those as well. So during today's session, which is the final part of the administration series, we're going to be going over some of the additional key site settings that are under your administration tab that are used to set up user profiles, and regards to creating user profiles and role types, that sort of thing that has to do with that. So we're going to answer questions such as, how do I create reviewer accounts? How do I deactivate a user when they leave my organization? How do I add new administrators? What is a role type and how to assign authority to each type of role? And then how to create a password policy. So if some of you want to use a password policy, we'll show you how to create that as well. So who's going to benefit from today's webinar? Of course, if you're a global administrator, this is usually a global administration functionality that is set up by global admin, since it is on the administration tab. So if you're responsible for the site maintenance, setting up user accounts, then you will benefit from today's session. The topics we're going to be covering today are going to be how to set up your user accounts, how to import user accounts, how to manage your password policy, and then we'll take a quick 5 to 10 minute break. Any of those questions that you've entered in the question box during our session, Maureen will be answering those, and then she'll be covering some of those questions during that break. Then after the break, we will continue on and talk about some of the site settings that are regarding maybe a functionality you may use, you may not use, for like example, managing external single sign-on. So if you're using that single sign-on, you're a university or you're having individuals log into your website, logging onto your website using their login for your website, and then accessing Community Force. We'll talk about some of the key settings that are involved in regards to that. And then role types, we'll talk about what those are. And then I'll talk about assigning fund opportunities to role types is another functionality we have that you may not be aware of that may be a benefit to you, especially if you have multiple users using the site. So the first topic then, of course, to get started, we're going to talk about how to set up user accounts, how to create user accounts on the site. And so setting up user accounts is where you're going to create role types or user accounts for individuals. And of course, if you are creating users in your site, we'll talk about some things that you do want to use caution with, especially if you're changing user role types. There are some important cautions to take note of. If somebody's already a reviewer, you don't want to change their role type to an applicant, because reviewers, applicants, global admins all have specific access to the site. And if you change their role type, they're going to lose that access. So when you're using role types, when you're creating user accounts, it's very important to know what role type you're giving them, what's the key functionality that they're going to be used. And especially global if you're a new admin and you're new to Community Force, or you have a new administrator and they don't have access to Community Force because, of course, they don't have the access to the global admin login maybe, what you can do is you can contact our client success team, client success at communityforce.com, or support@communityforce.com, and mention the change in your staff so that our team can help you get the access as your predecessor had. And then also, if you're having trouble not getting your password, maybe you can't get into Zendesk, you can't access that, you can't enter a support ticket, you can also feel free to send an email to these. Of course, try all the avenues possible to get your password by using that forgot password, and then as a last resort, in that case, then send an email to those two individuals, one of those individuals. So to access the setup users, I am logged in on the scholarship website. Now, if you are a grant user, don't be alarmed. This is the same functionality for a grant site as it is for the scholarship site. When you're setting up user accounts, there's a few little different things that you're going to see on your grant site that aren't going to be on the scholarship site, and I will cover those in today's session, those differences. So to get to the create users, I'm going to go to the administration tab here. And then from the administration tab, as soon as you get into that, you're going to be in the setup users account screen here. And so here on the setup user account screen, this is where you're going to see all of the users that have created accounts on your site. So here I'm going to see who the users are. If you have external ID, what that is that's if you're coming in from a third party, you're using login information from a third party. Your software on that third party site has an external ID, or your site, you have an external ID that you identify them with. This is where that external ID would be. If you don't use that, if you're not using single sign-on, you're not being integrated with your site, then of course you wouldn't have a need for this external ID, and it may not be present on your site. And of course you have the last name, the first name, their email address. So this email address is very important with the Community Force system, because this is the email address that we are always communicating with your applicants or anyone who has a role type. Anytime an email comes from the Community Force site, it's going to be looking at this email to send that information to that individual. And of course, this is their phone number. If you have phone number information, you can populate that. Don't get this confused with the cell phone number. This is different from the cell phone if you're using that SMS text functionality. This is not the cell phone column. So if you see a number here, don't assume that their cell phone number is available. And then some of our clients have a department field. This is not a required field, but if you have multiple departments, you might want to identify who that user is and what department they are. So that shows here. And then, of course, most importantly, their role type. How do they access it? Are they a reviewer? Are they an applicant? What type of role are they accessing the system? And then this column here, some of you, it'll be important too. If you have single sign-on, this is a very important column. If you don't have single sign-on, more than likely it's going to have non, and then maybe your abbreviation of your organization somehow would be here next to it. So what this type is with single sign-on, a user has an account on your website. And when they come to Community Force, their account is already created. So when they come to our site, that account would be the type, and then I just have CF. Yours isn't going to say CF and non-CF. Yours is going to be, like I said, an abbreviation of your organization. So this type, if it doesn't have non in front of it, means that user account, that login ID was created on your website, not the Community Force site. Your external website that's been integrated with Community Force, communicating with Community Force to allow that individual to log in. So anytime it says type and it has yours without the non, that means that account was created on your site and then it was pushed into the Community Force site. The non-CF, if you don't have single sign-on, the majority of yours are going to say non-CF because they're not coming from anything external, or non with the abbreviation of your organization is what it'll say, means that all of these were created on the Community Force site, not coming from another integration single sign-on. Status is whether they're active or inactive. An inactive account cannot log into the site. So when somebody leaves your organization, that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be making them inactive, and we will be discussing how to do that in today's session. And of course, this is the edit and then the delete. So anytime you need to make a change to an account, you can click the edit and that'll allow you to make a change. You can see when we click that edit, it's going to be the same as creating a user account. You just go in and make the adjustments. If you need to change their email, or you need to change their name or their date of birth, or add a cell phone, create a new password, all of that is here on this page when you go to edit. And of course, anytime you edit, make sure to hit save and exit to make those adjustments. And then finally, we also have the delete. Now, deleting an account totally removes everything off the site. Everything meaning their applications, if they're reviewers, their scores, everything they've done it will be removed if you hit delete. So any account that's already been on the site that has started using the site, do not delete, because you will delete their data. You never want to delete. You always want to make them inactive. So to create a user, it's very simple. You come to this page and you create user, and you may ask, well, why would I ever need to create a user? Well, of course, anytime someone logs into the site, so if I go here and I go to a login page, let me just log out of this one and make it easier here. Log out. And when they're in the login page, there's this create new account. This create new account will only create applicant accounts. This is the only type of an account this would create. So of course, if you have this button turned off, applicants can't create accounts. So if you have single sign-on, you might have this turned off. You would need to create accounts for them. Or reviewers. You have reviewers. You need to create accounts for a reviewer role type. Or you have new admins in your organization. You need to create admin accounts. You need to create those manually. The system doesn't automatically do that. The only automatic is when someone hits this create new account, that will automatically create an applicant role type account. So back to the create user. So to create a user, just simply click the create user button. And this will open up all the blank fields required to create an account. Anything with an asterisk is a required field. You must populate that field when you're creating a new account. External ID, you can populate if you have that for your single sign-on. And then of course the first name you would populate with the data. Last name does have to be populated, and then most importantly, email does need to be populated. Because of course, if you don't enter an email, they can't log in, and also you cannot communicate with them via email from the Community Force site because it needs that email address. That's why that's required. And so when you enter this email, use extreme caution to make sure you get the correct email address in there. And then of course, if you're using department, you can populate that. Country code. Now the reason I have it on my site as required is because I do have the SMS text feature activated on my site. So you can see here I require a country code, and a cell phone is required on my site because of that. I cannot create an account without those two fields populated. Now if you don't have that, then those asterisks will not be there and you will not need to create that data. You will not need to fill that in. Now, most importantly is role type. So we're going to stop here and just kind of discuss role types. And when you're creating a user account, think about that user and how they're going to be using your system, because an email can only be tied to one role type. You can't tie an email to two different types of role types. So if somebody's an applicant and they're an admin, then you need to think, okay, what's their most common functionality in the system, and create that role type to that email. If they need to have another access, maybe they're also an applicant. Well, then in that case, you would want to create a separate applicant account for a different email. They can't have the same email with two different types of roles. So when you're creating a user, always think about what's the most predominant use that they're going to have on the Community Force site. And once you create that role, you never, like I said before, you do not ever want to change the role type to something else, because you're going to lose their history. That's a very key role in creating users and setting up their role type. That's a very key functionality, is to not change the role type once you've created it for that email address, is if they've used the system. Now, if you create it and you realize you did it in error, of course, feel free to delete it, because if they haven't done anything, and then you'll be okay with that, of course. And then here, the sponsoring organization. So this is sponsoring org of the site. So this is the organization that's going to be maintaining the site of Community Force. So of course, we talked about that in one of our other sessions, what a sponsoring org is. And so you would want to make sure, if you have multiple sponsoring orgs, you select the correct ones that user would be accessing. And then of course, if you're using single sign-on and they're coming in from one site to another, then you want to make the appropriate changes here as well. Otherwise, just let it default to non-CF, and then that will be acceptable. Now with the grant site, there is a little bit of extra data here. When you're creating user accounts, I'm going to jump to the grant site here. And when you create a user account, you're going to have two additional fields. You're going to have not sponsoring organization, not just that, but you're also going to have company organization. And you're going to see that's required because grant sites are with organizations. So don't get the sponsoring org and the company org name confused. This is internal administration of the Community Force site. Organizations that you are having use administrative features of the Community Force site. This is the organization of the individual applying. That's why it's required. So this would be the name of the person that belongs to this organization that's applying for a grant on your grant site. And then also you're going to see here is primary user. That's for if you're using the agency managed members, where they can access other individuals' applications from within their organization. Since it's organization-based, we have that available for our grant users, where you can make them the primary user. If that says yes, then they can access other individuals' applications within the organization that's listed here. And we do have another training in regards to the managed member functionality, but as you're creating user accounts for individuals, you will want to, if it's an applicant, want to tag whether they're primary users or not. So now we go back to the scholarship site here, and just talking a little bit more about role types. So we do have a functionality, and I don't recommend it. It's usually for our grant users, that if you have an applicant, and this is the only direction it goes, we have what's called dual role type, where an applicant can be a reviewer. So with our grant users, a lot of times their applicants belong to organizations, but then those individuals may need to review. So when you're setting up that individual in the system, that's where you want to stop and think, okay, they're an applicant, but they also sit on my review committee to review grants for a specific program. So I want them to be able to apply their key functionality in the system. I want them to be able to apply. So I would make them an applicant. And then if you activate the dual role type in site settings, what it does is it allows you to assign applicants to an applicant profile to review. Those individuals, if you have that activated, when you're looking to create your committees, applicant names and reviewer names and admin names are all going to show up there to where you can then assign them individuals to review in the review process. So it's only that one direction. So if they're an applicant and they're a reviewer and you have a lot of those, then you might want to activate the dual role type functionality. If you don't have a lot, then just create 2 profiles for them, one for their applicant, one for the reviewer, because what it does is when you do go to do those assignments, you have a long list of applicants and reviewers that you have to cull through to find individuals to assign to committees. So it can get kind of tedious. And like I said, it's only one way. If they have a reviewer account already, you can't use that functionality. You do have to create the 2 separate accounts for them. Okay, so now we have assign password manually. So if I leave this no, what will happen is the system will create its own password, usually first name, last name with the 1, 2, 3. And then the account's created. Or if I select yes, I can actually enter my own password. And then if I enter something here, of course, I will have to have the responsibility of knowing what I entered there because they don't know. And I would need to notify them of what that password is because I've entered it for them. Now, if you don't use the password, if you put this assign password manually no, then of course it's going to create that password for them. Again, they don't know what it is, but you do have a functionality over here. Now, once you activate this to yes, every time you create an account for somebody, it will send an authentication email. Now, if they don't know that you're creating those accounts, I don't recommend you put this to yes because they're going to get an email and they're going to say, why do I have an account created? I didn't give any authority to do that, and that will cause an alarm, and then they may be contacting you. So if you're creating a bunch of accounts, then I don't recommend you send an authentication email. But if they do know you're creating the account for them, then feel free to send the authentication email. Now, the authentication email is located, so one thing you want to make sure of if you are using the authentication email to notify them, what does your authentication email say? So those emails are located on the administration tab here. And under Global Notification Center, you will see the system templates that are used when individuals create system accounts. This is the forgot password. This is the grant admin changed password. This is the one right here that's the authentication email. Password, new account confirmation. So this is anytime someone creates their own account as an applicant by creating new account, they get an email. Anytime you create a user account manually and select to send an authentication email, they get this email. It's the same email. So when you look at this message, don't make a message that's separate for one person and different for the other, because every single user account, whether they're a reviewer, an applicant, an admin, whatever role type they have, they're going to get this exact same email. So make it very generic. Don't say we created your reviewer account or your applicant account. You don't want to do that. You want to make it very generic, just that your account has been created. Now, that being the case, this is an email that's going to their email account. So if you're using this, that's fine, but there is a little bit of security concern because you're sending somebody an email with their login information and their password. And if that would ever get hacked, their email accounts, their email that they use gets hacked, then they have access to log into your site. So that's something, if you want to provide that, that's great. You do want to make sure that this merge field is here in that authentication email so that they get that. Otherwise, it might be better, to what I recommend is when you're creating user accounts, a little helpful hint is create a user account using the setup user accounts. Let the system create a password for them. You don't need to know their password. I don't send an authentication email, but what you can do is have the system assign it manually and then give them instructions when you actually let them know that the account is created. Let them know that they can go in and click the forgot password and create a new password that they would be able to log into. It's very, just give them the instructions on how to go to the site, click the forgot password. It'll send an email to them with a link to create their password, and then they'll know their own password and they'll create a new password on the site. That way you don't have to worry about, did I send them? Do I want that security with the password in it? I don't want to give that to them. You can have it manually create and then tell them when the first time they log in, click the forgot password, and that will send them the information on how to create a password on their behalf. And then of course here, this is important too. If it's active, they can log in. If you say no, they will not be able to log into the system. And then once you create your account, it's always important to click save. Forgot I clicked out of there when I was talking to you. Click save and exit. And then that will create the account. There we go. And now we have that account create. So that is how you create user accounts. So the next thing now we want to talk about is maybe you don't want to create you have several accounts you need to create. We have an import user account functionality, which allows you to create an export file where you can enter all of your users. Say you have 20 reviewers you need to create accounts for. You can take this Excel spreadsheet, enter those 20 users on the Excel spreadsheet, and then import those into the system, and it'll create the accounts for them. Very basic information that you can create for them. So to access import user accounts, there's two different locations you can do that on the site. When you are in setup user accounts, you have over here an import users. You can click that and that'll open up the import user screen. Or you can go directly to this drop down menu here, click import user accounts. And when you click that import user accounts, you'll see it takes you right to that exact same screen. I like to do it from the setup users because one of the first things you want to do before you create a batch of user accounts using the import feature, you want to make sure you don't have an account for that individual already. Because what will happen when you import a user account, say they're an applicant, and you create a list of your reviewers, and in that list of reviewers, they're now a reviewer. What the system's going to do is it's going to import the user, it's going to look, and if they have, it's going to find an email and it'll make the change from applicant to reviewer. You don't want that to happen because, of course, if that happens, you've changed the role type and you've changed their access, and they won't be able to access what they had in the system, and you've lost that data. So I always like to at least go through, quickly look at my list, look at who I'm going to be adding, and then make sure they don't have an account already in the system. So you can always come here, hit the search for those individuals. Once you're happy that they're not there, you're not going to overwrite their user account, then you can come over here, hit the import user, and import the data. So when you use the import functionality, we provide the Excel spreadsheet you need to use to do the import. You have to use our Excel spreadsheet. So you just click this little X here. And then once you click that, it's going to download a formatted Excel spreadsheet, pre-formatted for you. And we give you the instructions here in red on how to populate that Excel spreadsheet. As soon as it downloads here, I'll open it up for you. And this is the spreadsheet that we provide for you. So it's very important to use this. This is formatted to be able to import into our system. If you don't use this, then it may not function correctly. You'll notice there's only these fields. Each of these columns is a field. You cannot add to this. Don't try to add fields because the system won't read it. It doesn't know what they are, and it's not created to look at new fields, so you won't be able to add new fields. But if you notice here, if I pull this down here, you do need to populate the role type. This is very important. The first name, the last name, the email address column, and role types are all required fields. And then of course, if you leave the password column blank, it's going to be just like you're saying you're not creating the password, you're letting the system create it. So it's going to create a default password with the first name, last name, and then the numbers 1, 2, 3. So if you don't put anything in this field, it's just going to create that defaulted password for you. So what you do is you just come here then, and you just start adding the individuals you want to add. First name, last name, and then an email. And then I'm going to leave password blank. And then over here, if you want to populate the cell phone, this is nice too. If you have a lot of cell phones and you need to get those into the system because you're using that SMS text, you can enter that information here. And then that'll populate the cell phone for you as well. And then over here for role type, it only does applicant and reviewer. You can't do this for admins, but it's very important to not misspell applicant or misspell reviewer, because if you do, the system can't read that because it only knows these two terms, applicant and reviewer, and it knows what to do with them. So of course, it's always good. I like to just cut and paste a lot of times instead of trying to type it. And then of course, if I have a lot of applicants, of course, you can just pull it down and populate it that way. So then once you populate the sheet, make sure to save it to your desktop or wherever you want to save it. I'm just going to save it here to my desktop so I can access it easily. Okay, and then I can go ahead and close it. And then once it's saved, I will have to put you on hold for just one moment here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so once you have the create user here, then you come here and click the Upload Excel file. And then locate your file. And then it'll download it. And then you can click Save. And then once you're done, you just go back to the Setup User Accounts. And then those accounts that you just created will be there, created, ready to go. And there they are. It's that simple. So that's how you do the import users functionality. The next thing we want to talk about today is the Manage Password Policy. The Manage Password Policy allows you to create a password policy for your system based on the needs of your organization. If you do set up a password policy, we ask that you please notify us that you've done so. Because of course, our system, we need to know when we log in that you have that policy set and that our login information applies to your password policy as well. When I say our login information, I'm talking about our support login, our support team. To be able to support you, we need to know how to log into your site. So it's important that we know that you have what your password policy is and what that policy is. So password policies are exactly what they are. They allow applicants to create a password based on the parameters that you've set, like how long is it, how many times do they have to change their password, what can they use in their password. Those are all parts of the password policy. It's ways for you to create rules on how they're to create their passwords. So to create a password policy, again, we're in the administration dashboard. On the administration dashboard, you'll see here a Manage Password Policy. Right here it says Activate Policy. So if you do activate this, you would click Yes. You have the Enforce Password History. So this is what limits the user from reusing the most recent password. So what this does is this is the number of how many times they have to create a password that's different from the one that they're creating before they can reuse it. If I say 0, then when they create their password, they can keep using the same one over and over. So you want to put like 3. So they have to use 3 different passwords before they can repeat using that same one. The maximum password age, that's the number of days after which the user will be enforced to change their password. So maybe you have a policy that after every 90 days, you want your users to change their password, then you would want to make sure and put 90 in there for that to happen. Then you have a minimum password age. So you have the maximum, and then you also have the number of days for which a password has to be active before a user can change it again. So maybe you have you might not have a maximum, but you have a minimum password age. Then you have the minimum password length. That's how long does the password have to be. Maybe you've created passwords in the past, and those passwords you've seen where it says has to be 8 characters in length. Those minimum password length means that they have to have at least 4 characters in that password when they create it. And then allow the first name, last name, email ID, and password. When they're creating their password, do you want them to be able to use their first name in it, or their last name, or their email ID as part of that password? Then you can say yes. Otherwise, you want to put this as no. Dictionary words, so maybe you let them use words from the dictionary, any common word that's in the dictionary in their password. Then you want to make sure this is yes. Otherwise, put that to no. Allow consecutive number of characters. So maybe you don't want them to put a password with a 22 or a JJ or something like that at the end of their password. You don't want them to have consecutive characters, then you want to put this as no. And then a complex password forces them to create a combination of uppercase, lowercase letters, and numbers. And then the lockout duration is the time if they enter their password and it locks them out because they don't have the correct password. How long do they have to wait before they can try again? And of course, the lockout threshold is the number of invalid login attempts they have before they get locked out. And then, of course, once you're done creating that, you would want to hit save. And that's the password policy. So I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Maureen, and then let Maureen access the questions and answer any of those questions that you may have had. It's all yours, Maureen.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, we do have some interesting questions. One of the questions being, do I as an administrator have access to the user passwords in the system? No. Community Force does not reveal that kind of information to even the licensed users. It's saved at the back end. Nobody in Community Force can see the passwords too. So, privacy is not breached, but you are allowed to reset the passwords, as Christine has explained. And there's another question that says, are you limited to the number of admin users that you can add? There's no limit to the number of administrators that can be added to Community Force as such. However, administrators on the site are licensed users, meaning they will have a cost associated with it. We do allow multiple administrators, and then there is a subdivision called as department admins also. So there's a cost associated with any admin role type. If you are interested in adding more administrators to your website, someone who can help you and collaborate with you during your entire funding process, please reach out to us, open a ticket with us on Zendesk, or send an email to clientsuccess@communityforce.com. Someone will get back to you, and we'll process an invoice. If you're interested, we'll help you with that. Okay, if we activate the password policy, how does this change or impact users? This change impact users who have a password that does not meet requirements. Will they be prevented from logging in? Yes, Lynn. If you enable the password policy, then it will definitely impact all of your users, because now their previous passwords are not in the current new format. It's always, maybe it's the best way to do it is maybe send out an email, an announcement email to your users, telling them there's going to be an update on the password policy, and then update it, and then send out probably another email that the password policy has been enabled with all the rules in place. Apart from that, I would always, as I think Christine has already mentioned, that please inform Community Force, because we do not want to be locked out of the system too. Community Force would always want to have access for troubleshooting purposes, technical, non-technical, any questions that you open with us on Zendesk. We want to be able to be in a position to help you or all of our clients. One last question, Christine, I know we are not having enough time, but this is a very good question. If someone has interacted with this with the site as an applicant, and for now, and then comes back into the system as a reviewer or an evaluator, this mostly happens with grants or even with some of the fellowships or scholarships that we have. Is it possible to mark the applicant account inactive and then create a new reviewer account with the same email? Or is impossible, or is that impossible even with one account is inactive? So here's the thing: each account is associated with one single email address only. So my account in your system can only be with my email address. If I want to have another user account in the system as a separate role type, then I need to have it created as a separate email address. Okay, so, and that does not mean that you need to make the other applicant account inactive. You can keep that active, create another user account with a separate email ID. Okay, so one email address with one role type and one user account. So that's how it goes. So that way also your process remains clean. But if you need more help regarding this, Jay, just send me an email. we have another functionality. Maybe I can help you with that, which I do not want to confuse the rest of the users with. Okay, that's it from my side, Christine. All yours. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you so much, Maureen, for that. So we'll go ahead and continue now with the last three topics that we're going to discuss. So the next one we're going to talk about then is the external single sign-on. So if you have external single sign-on, then you would need to know where these settings are located. So if you're using this functionality, then this will benefit you. If not, then this will be just a nice to know so that you know that this is a functionality that we have available. So the Manage External Single Sign-On, what it does is it is the settings needed to do the single sign-on authentication with your site. So single sign-on, an applicant has an account on your site, they're logging into your site, and then your site is taking them to the Community Force site, and then that account is created on the Community Force site for them to access the Community Force site through that integration process. So when you first go online with Community Force, of course, we do set this up for you, but if you need to, if maybe your URL changes or something changes or there's a message you want to change, you'll know how to access that going forward. So going back to the site here, to get to the Manage External Single Sign-On Authentication settings, I'm still under the administration dashboard, logged in as an administrator, and I'm going to go to the Manage External Single Sign-On Authentication settings. Here are all the settings that are used that you can make changes to. So of course, enable single sign-on. If you have that, that should say yes. The single sign-on redirection URL. So this is if they're trying to sign in, and then it's communicating with Community Force and it times out, where do you want them to go? Do you want, what's the URL that it reverts them back to? That's an important feature that you need to make sure it's got the correct information in. And then allow new user creation. So you can put this to yes, they can come to the Community Force site directly and create their own account. If you put this to no, then they cannot come to the Community Force site directly and create their own account. It has to be an account coming from your software. If it's not coming from your software, then it won't allow an account to be created. Now, if you say allow new user creation and you have proxy or collaborations, if you're a grant user, those words probably have meaning to you because you may have where an applicant, a proxy means somebody else can apply on behalf of somebody but log in as that individual using their own credentials. Or collaboration is they're collaborating with somebody to complete a section. That is a collaboration functionality. And in those functionalities, those individuals have to have user accounts. So if that user account isn't created, if this says yes, then the applicant can create a user account. If this says no, then applicants won't be able to create new accounts for collaborators or proxies. They have to have an account on the site already, and that account has to have already been created before they can collaborate or log in as a proxy for somebody. So that's something to think about too. If you allow new user creation, if you're wanting the applicants to create user accounts for their proxies and collaborators, then you would want to make sure that you have this set to yes. And then again, the applicant ID length. If you have an ID length of how long that login has to be, then you want to make sure that our site communicates that is the same. We want to make sure that these coincide together. With that ID, how long is that ID? That's that external ID. How long can that be? And then the link expiration time. So when they're trying to link and during that linkage, I don't know why there's you want to give the system maybe 50 seconds to do that link. And then if it doesn't, then they get this expiration time message and letting them know that the time has expired. Please try to log in again. So this link expiration time and the link expiration time message works together. And so this is the message that you would want them to see if that time frame was met and they couldn't get logged in. The shared secret key, anytime we do integration with a another application program, then of course there's a key that has to be entered to be able to make that communication happen. If you would have, for some reason, have that changed, this is where this would be, but we also ask that you also communicate that to Community Force, because there is some things that we may have to do in the background as well. Incoming URL, this is your URL from your site that is communicating with Community Force. What's the name of that URL that they're going in to log, the page that they're logging in on your site that's communicating with Community Force. And then of course, if it's trying to log them in and the authentication fails, that's what this authentication failed message is all about. This is the message that they would get during that failed authentication. And of course, if you make any changes to this, then you would want to go ahead and click save to save your changes so that it is correct in doing that. So that is the Manage External Single Sign-On Authentication settings. And the next thing we want to talk about is role types and how to manage your role types. So a role type, of course, is used to describe the access that a user has to be able to work in various areas of your system. So key ones are admin, applicant, reviewer. Those are the three different accesses we have to our site. So depending on their role type, that's what it gives them access to. So before setting up your user accounts, that's what you want to think about. What's the role types that you need on your system? What access do individuals need to have? And then create role types based on that, especially admin. So of course the system, when you get the system, when you have it, usually it comes with the global, the applicant, and the reviewer. But you do have also the department admin or the global reporting. You have that role type, but you do have the ability to create role types where individuals can have very limited access to the site. So maybe you want one of your administrators to have access to be able to just look at the applicants. You can create small role types like that without being charged. But if you do try to give someone a role type that is an administrative full access, we will know that, and you will be charged a fee to create someone that has full access to the site. But you can give someone limited access and create a specific role type for that access if you wish. So how do you do that? How do you create role types? How do you modify access to role types? Again, administration dashboard. We're logged in as an admin. We're going to go down here to manage role types. And here in manage role types, you're going to see the different role types on the system. Again, you're going to see global admin, reviewer, and applicant. You're going to notice those cannot be deleted. Those are required role types on our system. If I click in here, you'll even see it doesn't even give me the ability to edit. It's all grayed out, and I cannot make any edits to those three types of role types. Now, the other role type that you have that is a paid role type is usually what the department reporting or the department admin. So those two, you do have the ability to edit. You can come over here and click edit. I do not recommend you delete those because, of course, if you delete a role type that's been used, you're going to delete that individual's access. But you can edit. So maybe your department admin and your department reporting, you want to give them a little bit more access than what the default is when you get the system. Like I said, you can go in and adjust that. You just don't want to give them the full access to the site, or you will be well, you can give those individuals, I'm sorry, you can give those individuals access to the site because those are paid users. If you don't want them to have full access, though, you can come here and unselect. Maybe you don't want them to get into the evaluation section. You can unselect that. Or maybe you want them to have access to the evaluation, but you don't want them to have access. You want them to be able to assign, but maybe they don't need to be able to review. They just need to be able to assign. You can go in and select the areas that they can have access to in our site. And you can limit to what they have access to. Now, also you have other role types you can create. You can see one here. I have one called faculty. Maybe I'm a university and I have some faculty members that need to be able to get in and see just the applicants that have applied. I can actually go in. I can follow the path. You do have to give them access via the path and what you want them to have access to. So they would have to have access to the home page. I want them to be able to have manage applicants and be able to see and release sections to applicants that have applied. I can give them that limited. Again, you can't select all of these, because if you do select all of these, we will charge you a fee to create those accounts on the system. So that's creating role types. If you want to add a new role type, it's just a matter of going over here, add new role type, and then you can give it a name. And then of course here you can give them the access to the information that maybe I want somebody to be in charge of my whole entire evaluation process. I can come here, give them access, and then they will be able to review the evaluation process. And then I can click save, and then that's all they would have access to. And then that role type would be created. And then again, like I said, if you want to delete somebody, if you haven't used those, it's okay to delete them. But once those role types are being tagged to an individual, you do not want to delete that role type. Can't express that enough. Okay, so that's how you manage role types. And then along with manage role types, a functionality that we have that a lot of you may not be aware of is a functionality that's called assign funding sources to role types. And this allows you to assign a funding source. So in the manage fund setup, you can actually assign funding sources to specific role types. Then those role types are the only ones that have access to those funding sources. So let's say I have, some people use sponsoring org, only allows certain sponsoring orgs, but maybe within that sponsoring org or that your organization, you have individuals with different roles that only need to access, they're part of the same organization, but they need to access certain funds. I don't want my administrator from this team to have access to an administrator from another team's funds. So you can create role types. I would recommend making them generic. Don't use people's names, but just use like role types. Like you saw, I had a faculty, or I had, different role types. Create those role types and then give them access to do the functionalities they need to do. And then they can only have access to those specific funds. And that's what this does. It gives them access based on role type to the fund. And this is something that you have to activate on your site. So before using it, you do need to go to Manage Site Settings. And then under the Manage Site Settings, you've got these grant fellowship settings. And then you're going to see here, show funds based on role type. And you would want to make sure that's marked as yes. Then once that's marked as yes, then you're going to see over here in this administration tab here, you're going to see the assign funding opportunities to role tab. And it's very simple here. You just look at your listing of funds here, select a role type. What's the role type? So let's say faculty. And then once I select that, the listing of fundings appear. So then here I can say, give me my active funds, my inactive funds, or if I just leave it as select, it's going to give me all the funds that are out there. But I only want to do this with my active funds. So then I get my list. The role type is faculty, and I only want to give faculty access to, and I can actually do control and select multiple if I want, or just select the one, hit the arrow over to the left here, have it go right, and then go ahead and hit save. Are you sure you want to assign it? Say yes, and then it'll have that assignment. And then that role type, anyone who has that role type under their user profile are the ones that can access those funds. If they don't have that role type, then they can't access those funds. So that is it for the assign funding opportunities to role type. And that's all I have to cover today. So I will turn it back over to you, Maureen, and you can do the closing questions and see what we have for that.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Christine. Okay, there is a question that is related to what type of external systems can Community Force integrate with? So we have a lot of clients who use Banner, PeopleSoft, Datatel, GuideStar, Salesforce, and single sign-on. That is with the client database. All of that can be done, but one thing is, it applies to all external software. That is, if the external software has open APIs, Community Force can integrate with those software. So you just need to know which software has open APIs. And if you are interested in something like that, to integrate with Community Force and the other software, do reach out to us, send an email at clientsuccess@communityforce.com, or open a ticket with us on Zendesk. Either way, someone will get back to you, try to get your details, and then we'll put something in place. We'll probably have more meetings to understand your requirements, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so that's external system integrations. And what else is there? We have one question that is, how do I send SMSs? Because that was a question that happened at the beginning when Christine was mentioning about phone numbers. So it's an add-on. It's not an integration, it's an add-on. There might be a cost associated with it, but it's just a very nominal cost. So reach out to us, same thing, write to us at clientsuccess@communityforce.com, or open a ticket with us on Zendesk, and one of us will get back to you and talk to you about the details. Okay, so that's just another add-on. I think I have replied to all of the questions in writing and in the question panel. So that's it from my side, Christine. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Maureen. So let's go ahead then, and we'll go ahead and close the session. So of course, make sure that you get a copy of the resources that are attached to the handout. Make sure you download this handout and get those. And then of course, make sure that those resources will give you the click here, and that will take you to the Zendesk. And so if you have those and you've got this downloaded, then you'll be able to access some of the more detailed information on those topics that we covered today. And then of course, we have, if I can get to the end of it here, these are all the resources available. And then we still have also the features for some of the new features that we had with the new 11.1. So that'll be at the end of this handout. So if you get this, then you'll be able to access those as well. And of course, we thank you all for attending today's session. We appreciate your time. And you will receive a recording of this meeting in your inbox in the next day. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our client support team on Zendesk by following the link below here. And then someone enter a support ticket if you have anything you want to discuss, maybe some of the functionalities that we talked about, you want help turning those on. Please feel free to enter a support ticket and ask for someone, maybe a client support specialist, to reach out to you to be able to give you answers to those questions and be able to maybe do a small process review with you to go over them as well. So again, we thank everyone for your time, and our next webinar will be in November. More than likely, it'll be November let's see here, the next one will be November 12th. So please be on the lookout for that to be coming through on your inboxes so that you can get registered for that as well. And then we'll have the topic and agenda in that message also. So thank you, everyone, and everyone have a good day. Goodbye.